Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is David Edgar, and I am your host as always. And there is nothing worse than when you are subjected to repeats on the telly. And with no Rangers fans at the Old Firm match yesterday, we all were the same old, same old. Joining me to discuss it, it's becoming a bit too familiar on here as well, is first of all Andy McGowan.
Aye, bit of a specialist in this subject now, actually. So thanks for having me back on.
Always a pleasure, mate. And joining us to bring fresh voice to what is an unforgivably too often occurring problem is Ross Hutton.
Thanks very much for having me, Davey. Cheers.
Andy, Old Firm matches for Rangers fans in the last couple of years have become like going to the dentist. You know what it's going to be, you know it's going to be unpleasant, and you just have to get through it. And it looked to me yesterday like the team believed that as well. I watched the game, and like every other Rangers fan, was utterly pissed off. But I watched it back today ahead of the podcast because I think it's always important to do that, to see if your perceptions were right. We do one immediately after, in which we get to vent all our feelings there and then that we've seen in the game. But I like to watch it back to see if things that you don't notice as you're following the ball and caught up in the mayhem were true. Watching that performance back today actually was worse. And I'll tell you why, because that Rangers team were not doing basics that I expect. And that, by that, I mean they were not tracking runners, they were not marking space, they were not following their man, they were not able to make passes and whatnot. That's quality issue, as we know, but they were not doing basics without the ball that I expect any football team to do. And although it's, I think, a bit of a kind of false comfort blanket for folk to go, well, they just weren't trying, because then it's easy to fix. You just get them to try. It isn't that. It's worse than that for me, because the reason that they played like that is because they're inhibited. And when they go there and they're inhibited, they don't play their natural game. They don't just play the 11 men on the park. They've built this occasion up into something in their mind that they then play that they're scared of. And when you've got guys constantly brain freezing, doing things that as professionals should be automatic, to me, it's as much a mental issue as a physical one.
Christ, Davey. I was doing a bit, but you're right. I said it yesterday. I said, I think the worst part about this, I think I said it at half time, the worst part about this is I think they were up for it at the start, right? And the first 10 minutes were reasonably bright. Moving the ball about, bit of purpose, bit of energy, create a couple of good chances. Should have scored for them. Maybe have been offside anyway, but still we should have put them in the net, put it out in their mind. We are totally skewered mentally by their offside goal, right? So this is the thing, the score. I immediately said to my wife, I said, that's offside, that's not going to stand. And what's going through my mind then is, good, now you know how it feels, because we had that kind of deflation, elation, deflation is
exactly what I thought.
A pretty hard thing to take. Aye. Yep. And I thought, good, I hope that really busts them a wee bit. What actually happened was our team suddenly realised, Christ, they can cut through us like butter. That's how easy it was. We were on top there, and all of a sudden they break down the park once with one pass and they've scored for it. All right, it's offside. But I think it had the other effect. And that talks to the exact point you're making there, Davey, which is that we've got a multitude of problems on the park, and the mentality side of it, the psychological part, whatever you want to call it, is now becoming a big, big thing. And, you hear the phrase, we've got their number. They've got your number just now, and it's back taking us, not even square one, but it's the Gerrard situation when he came in, he inherited similar, and he had to work very, very hard to slowly but surely get a foothold in these games, come close a couple of times, close the gap in these games, and eventually turn the tide to the point where we're actually at the other side of it, and we had their number. The biggest worry I've got is that the Scottish Cup final, I came away from that thinking, we were all right and we should have won it, and if it wasn't for some poor refereeing, we probably would have got the break. They would have seen us win the cup. And getting into this season, I thought, or this game, I thought we're not quite there. It's early doors, but I want to see signs of progress. I did not expect to win, but what I was setting myself up for was I want to see signs of progress. I want to see just what I'm talking about with Gerrard, where you can see things building, and all right, you're not quite there yet, but it's something to take into the next game in terms of belief and just simple footballing tactics. And what you've described, Davey, is things that just should not be happening in any Rangers game, far less a game of this magnitude where we're up against the biggest rivals. They're representing their fans. A lot of them should be making a name for themselves in terms of, what happens this season. What role are they going to play? Are they going to be a leader? Are they going to be a first choice pick? After the first 10 minutes, it couldn't have been any worse, and 3-0 flatters us. And what I would say is, I'm an optimist. People listening to this pod know I am an optimist by nature, and I try to temper it with reality. And I'm often saying it's never as bad as it seems. I'm kind of yesterday. I'm like, this may be as bad as it seems, but I still think I'm raw for yesterday.
No, I think we all are. Ross, what's your take on a team that went there with absolutely zero belief that they could get a result?
I think that translates to the fans as well. I'm struggling to remember an Old Firm that had such a low-key build-up from our perspective, whether that be talking to colleagues in the office, yourselves, friends, family, just fellow Rangers fans. Nobody was up for it because the result basically seemed predetermined before we went there, and that's a horrendous position to be in as a fan. It's even when times are bad, and Christ knows we know what bad times feel and look like. It's the hope that keeps you going. It springs eternal, because nothing is fated in football. An out of character performance might have overcame us yesterday. Celtic might have had an off day. Things might have went our way for once, but I think in our heart of hearts we really knew what was going to happen yesterday, and that's exactly how it played out. The opening 10 minutes, I was thinking to myself, right, okay, we need to score here, because there was no way we could have sustained that level of aggressive pressing over the course of 90 minutes. It's just not possible. I don't think for any team it is, to be fair. It's just not possible. The energy exertion you need to be able to provide in that kind of atmosphere, in those kind of moments, to be able to keep that up is superhuman. So I was thinking, if we can score early, and we should have Andy's right, whether it was offside or not, it's kind of immaterial. The fact we weren't able to at least put the notion in their head that we carried a threat was criminal. So the fact we weren't able to do that was damning in itself, and I think your assessment's spot on. They get their tails up when they had a goal disallowed, which is totally counterintuitive. That should have been the boost for us, because if we think back to last year at Ibrox when Kamara Roof's goal was ruled out, how deflating that was, and then Celtic basically got up the park and scored before half-time. But the attitudes are completely different between the sides. They get that goal ruled out yesterday and they think, all right, okay, well, that was quite simple to be able to cut through this Rangers team. Let's go and do it again. We had that goal ruled out last season, and I think collectively we all thought, oh shit, we've had to work so hard just to get that goal, and now, it's counted for absolutely nothing. So the psychology is very different. And I think one of the key things for me, and how depressing this all is that complete lack of hope that we have now. I don't want to come on here and be completely defeatist, but it's difficult not to be under these kind of circumstances, because we go into Old Firms now thinking that we have no agency over the outcome. Because if we can't sustain or capitalise on a balls to the wall approach over the course of 90 minutes, but we're also, I don't believe, good enough to be able to hold out for, say, an hour, 70 minutes, and then spring into life, then what can we do? Tactically, I'm a wee bit confused here, because we don't have the quality to be able to pull off either of those two types of performances and those two tactical disciplines. So we're really going into every Old Firm now hoping that Celtic have an off day. And if you're going into every derby like that hoping that the opposition do something so you can capitalise, there's no way to win these on a regular basis. I think Adam shared the numbers with us earlier on today. I know, Andy, you mentioned Gerrard there. But Gerrard's Old Firm record: played 13, won 8, drawn 1, lost 4. Post Gerrard, played 16, won 2, drawn 3, lost 11. And I don't know about you boys, but for me, I can't see any signs of that changing.
Well, here's the thing you just mentioned there about agency. You're absolutely right. We as fans don't have any agency, particularly in that game, because none of us are there. The players do. And there is a difference between us thinking they're not going to get anything and the players are even thinking they're not going to get anything. That's, to me, completely different. We are maybe going on past experiences the last few years, but the players should have been arriving there yesterday thinking, here, we've got a real point to prove. We could really turn some opinions on ourselves, and they didn't do it. First 10 minutes, as I say, were fine, but I don't think, and I don't think any Rangers fan is fooled by them, because the challenge was going to come once Celtic went up a few gears. How would you deal with that? And we collapsed. We completely and utterly capitulated. And then the second half, they relax a bit. We get a wee bit more time on the ball. We make a few chances. Still don't take any, right enough. Never have them in any serious trouble. But that wasn't a close game, Andy, and I don't think anyone's deluded in our support that it was. After the match, I said, because people tend to blame something and stick with that, whereas my point yesterday was there is blame to go around a lot of people for this performance and the situation we find ourselves in that Ross alluded to. I blame the board, firstly and mostly, because everything comes back to them. They've made rotten decision after rotten decision for 3 years, and that's what's led us to be where we are. But the idea then that, and that means there's absolutely nothing the manager can do, or there's nothing the players can do, I don't buy. And I don't think you need to pick one. I think there's issues with the board, yes, but when you're talking about yesterday's match, I didn't like the tactical setup. I know people are saying, oh, well, it's a team we would all have picked. Aye, but we would maybe have trained them through the week to try some different things as well, because it was the same errors. Now, what I struggle to understand is you go in with Tav, who isn't even, by the way, the Tav of last season, quite clearly. He was a forlorn figure yesterday. He's lost a yard and he knows it, and his confidence has gone with that. You went in against Maeda, who's been in form already this season, and there were no plans in place to protect him, to help him double up. What does the manager expect to happen there? What happens is what happened. There was no plan. Kyogo likes to drop deep for the ball. There was nothing that seemed to be in place for that. So I don't really buy that it's the blame of one. And equally, if you say it's the manager's fault, it's totally his fault, or it's the players, it's totally... I don't buy any of those arguments. The blame for yesterday, in different ways, lies, for me, at three doors.
Well, they say it's a game of inches, but all the wee inches you gain or you get right add up and get you over the line. There's some yards missing in our plan, is what's happening here. I mean, you've just highlighted one, the setup. So I've got sympathy for Clement to a degree, and on the other side of the coin, I'm the exact same as you. There's things sticking out a sore thumb that should be so much better. The tactics yesterday, right? So you say that the team that was picked was probably a team that 90% of Rangers fans would have picked. I think that I don't think he's got much choice but to play this kind of, and I use the term brave because it is brave, and he done it last season at Parkhead, and it might have come off if we'd scored the first goal, but he plays this fairly open, progressive game, and tries to go toe-to-toe. He does it in Europe as well, tries to go toe-to-toe, because we've not got the players to do anything else. If you said, right, let's do a Walter Smith style, rope-a-dope, sit back, absorb, hitting the break, we've not got the players to do that. We've just not got the defensive backbone anywhere in the team to make that happen. And if you were to make it happen, you'd need to make radical changes to the personnel. You need to bring in more defenders, out-and-out defenders, It just can't be done. So we've got players that have got to play more or less in a certain style, and it lends itself to this wide open, Celtic know how to play against us, and they can break through us anytime they want. It will. So we've got a major problem going forward in terms of if we want to win Old Firm games, but also this will lend itself greatly to the European games. I think we've got a problem in that a lot of our personnel don't fit pragmatic approaches, i.e. sitting in. We did it against Kiev a wee bit, but Kiev were as equally patient as we were. They weren't actually playing at the break. They were just picking time to come through. So I'm worried about that. I'm really worried. We don't have two fullbacks that are fullbacks, defensive fullbacks. Look at Celtic and Greg Taylor or Sir Johnson. They can defend first and foremost. They're good enough to go forward. We've got a setup now where Tav should be attacking, but we don't get that off him now. And you have to, early days for him, but he is an attacking fullback, out attacking fullback. So there's all this kind of thing going on, David. You think about the dressing room, you think about that belief piece we're talking about there. If you looked around that dressing room, who is it you're going to look to that's got that contrary fuck them attitude that we can go to Parkhead and actually in their back door take their 3 points and treat them with contempt? There's nobody in that team that I think would portray that kind of attitude that's required. Gerrard had it as a manager, and it eventually filtered down through the rest of the team. You had individuals that had it as well. You know, Morelos had it, and he didn't get the best of that attitude until he actually could control his temper. But Morelos had that contempt. You had other players in the team that had that quiet determination, and eventually we were able to turn the tide on. We've not got enough of these players in our team. It's why I've got a problem with John Suter. I don't see it in him. It's why I've got a problem with the likes of Dessers. He's the softest shit in every sense. And unfortunately, yesterday we've seen more players fall into that weak, soft category. Czerny barely won a duel. Even Big Sterling, to a degree, was caught cold too often, didn't use his physicality. The team and the squad is the wrong side of the power dynamic that we want. We're too soft. And that's where, again, it's a personnel problem. We're going to have to change that as the windows go on. So you said the three doors, but so I'm presuming you mean the board, the manager, the players. There's no leadership anywhere. And I feel sorry for Clement about the leadership part, because I was saying to Ross before I came on, it's hard for a foreigner to get that innate nuance when he's trying to handle the Rangers support. Kashina had that same problem. Le Guin had that same problem. Walter Smith could do it because he knew it innately, because he was immersed from his youngest years in what we understand to be the football world. It's hard for Clement to get that, and I think that's why a lot of folk react badly to his post matches, because I don't read into post matches. He's not going to come out and say what we say, because he can't afford to throw players under the bus even if they deserve it or not, and he's got to keep an even keel even when privately he might be sitting there saying, Jesus Christ, we've got major problems. So I don't read too much into it. But it's a problem because football fans the world over don't get what I've just said, and that's not their fault. That's just football fans. So the leadership has to help, and I mean the club needs to help Clement in that regard. The players need to help Clement in that regard as well by performing. And I mean, I could go on and on, but yesterday the big thing for me, as you said, was on the park. If he set them out to do things in that formation, those tactics, but they then don't do the basics. That first goal, Alistair Johnson is busting his ass to get to that byline and get the ball across. Rabbi Matondo, the fastest player I've ever seen, slows down. See stuff like that. That is unforgivable, and there is no manager in the world that can put desire into a player. I disagree when I hear, managers got to get them fired up. You can get them fired up to a degree, but desire comes from within, and we've got too many players that are wishy-washy. Matondo epitomised it for me yesterday, and too many then follow the lead. Last word on it just now, David. I think the first goal, we know that the first goal is integral, right? You get the first goal, you get a wee bit of spring in your step, the other team hopefully don't, you get the opposite. So that compounded our problem yesterday. They got the first goal, the game becomes an even bigger uphill challenge. At that point, we'd lost the game. That should never be the situation where a Rangers team loses a game if they're losing one goal, regardless of who we're playing. It's untenable.
Ross, I think the Andy's mentioned there the lack of leadership on the pitch, and I totally agree. I think we've got a team full of supplemental players. We've got no real guys who are the ones that you hang your hat on. Tav, as the captain, takes the brunt of it. I'm sure we've all seen the footage outside Ibrox yesterday. Captains always will. For me, I think this needs managed because he should not be in the team, full stop, at the moment, because he isn't, as Andy said, he's not doing anything going forward. And he has his defensive capabilities, which were never strong, are even worse. He does appear to have lost a bit of pace, and to me, he looks like a guy who knows it and is getting a bit frustrated because he can't do the stuff that he was able to previously. I did say all summer that I thought he should go for his own sake because it's just going to get worse. And that is exactly how I see it. The more he plays, the worse it's going to get.
And the more toxic it's going to become. Yeah, you're completely right. It's getting sad watching James Tavernier now because I'm fully in the camp, David, that James Tavernier has made an immense contribution to Rangers over what we're about to enter his 10th year at the club. I think some of the dirge of players that he's had to play with, but still came out and contributed the amount of goals and assists that he has. I think he's been a different type of leader to the one that we would traditionally be used to or maybe even want to see as Rangers fans. He's got a legendary place in the club for being the captain to win 55 in the manner that he did. But what have you done for me lately? Not an awful lot. I think I've been reading and listening to a lot of chat about this new slightly inverted role for him could be the way forward if he doesn't have the legs to go up and down the wing. But this is the problem, right? Okay, maybe that'll work at home to your Ross Counties and your Dundees et al. When you're going to Parkhead, when you're playing Celtic at Ibrox or Hampden, in those big games and big moments, he can't do it anymore. He can't, and that they know it as well as we do. One of those things that I said was predetermined before the game, and the two of you spoke about it on the post-match yesterday as well, is everybody knew going to Parkhead that Maeda would run up and down the wing and completely rip Tav to shreds, and that's exactly what happened. And looking at Tav yesterday, I think you could tell he knew it was going to happen as well, because he must know in his heart of hearts that he can't compete with Maeda in the foot race. Everybody knows that, right? And he's never been terribly the best defender anyway, out and out, for being totally honest with ourselves. So you're leaving him exposed. It's not fair on him, to be perfectly honest. So if we're not doing something differently tactically to try and combat that, and I saw nothing yesterday to suggest that we had or had thought about that, then you're just leaving him to be exposed like that, and it's not fair on him. Going forward, it's a big, big question mark for us now, because you're right, the time to really properly put that to bed and have a real clean break from the previous leadership regime on the park was over the summer. And for whatever reason, the failure to move James Tavernier on is a decision that could come back to haunt us this season. Because if you drop him now and you remove the armband and give it to Jack Butland, Dujon Sterling, whoever you want to give it to, I don't really care, then that creates a whole media storm that Clement might think he doesn't need at this moment in time. He might think it's more hassle than it's worth to have that level of disruption in the squad. Against that, though, if he continues to play James Tavernier in these kind of games, he will cost them, and ultimately might cost him his job. So it'll take a hell of a brave decision from the manager to drop him in this current sphere, given the performances that he's putting in. But it's a decision that he does need to make, because it's not good for the rest of the team to see their captain. If you're looking round for support, you're looking round for leadership on the park, and you see the captain looking so dejected, feeling sorry for himself, you can tell his confidence is shot. That doesn't help anyone. It doesn't inspire confidence in the rest of the side. So if Clement wants to really be radical and really do something different, which I think we all agree he does need to do now, then dropping Tav is the first place to start.
The radical thing today, and this is really radical, and some of you might laugh at it, is to play him in midfield and get the Feyenoord boy at right back. Because, and I might be wrong here, but I think because he's the captain and he's the major earner in our club now, I think there'll be an unspoken pressure that he needs to contribute to some degree. He's not leaving now, the window's shut, unless one of the countries that have got a window open take him. That's just a thing I'm throwing in there, because we're going to have to do some things, no radical surgery overall, because we've got what we've got in terms of personnel, but there needs to be tangible changes in the approach and the way we do things, because we're talking about Tavernier there against Celtic. It was kind of the same, earlier games in the season where you're like, he's no got his yard of pace anymore. He's no quite, as you say, David, the same as he was even last year when he was kind of struggling. So I don't know, David and Ross. There's things that need to happen and a wee bit out the box thinking to maximise what we've got at our disposal, because what we've got at our disposal it's not a jigsaw that fits just now.
I think the thing with playing Tav in the middle of the park, and I'm maybe comparing two different situations here, so please tell me if I am, but having watched England over the summer and playing Trent Alexander-Arnold in the middle of the park, two completely different quality level of players, I understand, but it is a different role, completely different to what he was used to, and he was exposed for that.
Yeah, I mean, surely the simpler thing, Andy, is you play a different right back and you play a midfielder in midfield.
No, yeah, listen, I'm throwing it in because could he play in front of the centre halves and do a wee bit of dictating a play and use the ball and a wee bit
games,
ball
maybe, but would he do it better than the other guys that we've got? That's the thing. To me, it's just right. We need to find something for him to keep him on the side, and I think
that's what happened. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I just, and look, by the way, before anyone gets upset at us and says, "Oh, you're singling out player X, player Y," they were all honking yesterday. I mean, they really were. They were absolutely, second best in their own personal duels. They were second best all over the park. They were second best in terms of desire, and that I think is the hardest thing to take, Andy, because you can go there and get done. At the moment, they're better players than us. As painful as that is to admit, it's a fact, right? You can go there and get done by a bit of quality. That's happened to us in the past, and it hurts like hell, right? But it doesn't hurt the way yesterday did, because we didn't get done by superior quality. They wanted it more, and they worked for it more, and that I cannot accept.
Well, I think they win their battles. It's like the old adage: they win their battles and it let their quality come through. I've said it before, said it post-match yesterday, and I've said it already on this pod. We've got a major problem with physicality, and too many of our players bounce off other players. You've seen it yesterday with... Right, so Dessers does not lay a glove on either Carter Vickers or Scales, no matter who he matches up to, and that's every game he's played, that's been the case, more or less, right? Doesn't win any duels, barely holds a ball up, barely gets a layoff, right? It's not possible to achieve what we're looking to achieve away from home at Parkhead with Cyril Dessers at centre forward.
So in that case, this goes back to my thing about, would you change tactics? You go with a 3-5-2 yesterday and you say, right, that'll give us a bit more security at the back, we can pack the midfield, and then we've got two guys to occupy their centre halves.
Well, I don't think Dessers should be playing this press that we've got, right? I can see the point, I can see what he's trying to do, but it cannot function with Dessers, and or let's say Dessers and Lawrence, as we've seen so far this year. And that's why yesterday I was like, all right, he's got Diamandi in there, at least he's got a bit of legs and a wee bit of dig, and he can use the ball, and he moves the ball fast by passing it when he gets it. So, and again, I'm no singling out Dessers. This is a fact for me that I'm resolute in, that he's just not the player to play that role. And if he's got somebody closer to him, whether it's a Danilo, whether it's going to be Bajrami when he comes into a team, then I think he needs to be more of a 2 than this 1-1, whatever the hell we're trying to play, this 10 behind him. It just doesn't work. He's not got the attributes to do what we need to do. We need somebody to hold the ball up. Sorry, Ross. We need somebody to hold the ball up to allow us the opportunity to move forward and catch up with play and then progress. Right? It just doesn't happen. So the physicality, I think, all through the team, even wee Barron, right, who I love, I think he's going to be a great player for us, was found out physically yesterday in a lot of challenges. Cherny I've mentioned already. Diamandi really, really worked hard. Manfrey tries to get his turn on the man and roll his man. Came off a few times and he was fouled. But again, he was just short in that physicality that I'm needing. And I don't see Bajrami changing that, but I do see the boy for Feyenoord adding to the power equation. We need to get a stronger team, a more physical team, and we could do another 3 or 4 of the Sterling standard in terms of physicality. Because I said it yesterday, he sticks out a sore thumb purely because he's getting more physicality and 2 or 3 other players put together. Rangers team shouldn't have that. We need to be at the same level as Celtic in terms of strength, power, physicality. Because if you've not got the quality, then you need to at least match that up.
Sorry, Andy, I was going to say there, sorry for butting in, but I think if you want to really demonstrate the gulf in quality between ourselves and Celtic, then you've got a tale of two strikers. Yesterday, Desser's coming into one of the biggest games of the season. He is on form, or was at least going into that game, scoring plenty of goals. He looked sharp against Ross County for all that's worth in a game like this, and was awful. Nothing was sticking, couldn't finish his dinner. You had the horrendous back pass effort in the first half, might have been offside, but then there was one in the second half as well, which was equally as bad.
He choked.
And then you've got, from Celtic's point of view, you've got Kyogo there. I think he's started 3 games for them this season, not scored any, but they left their new £9 million striker on the bench because they knew he's a big game player, and he turns up in a game like this, whether that be to torment us by dropping deep and then allowing space for other players, or by what he so often does for them, popping up with an absolutely crucial goal. So, yeah, okay, I can absolutely appreciate the point that Dessers will contribute over a league season. I think he will. I think he's shown that. I think that's probably beyond question now. But not in these games, not in the big games, not when it matters most. He doesn't cut it. And that's, again, we've got a big enough body of evidence to show that now, I think, again, without argument.
I think that Dessers is a symptom. I don't think he's the cause, and I think that sometimes people can fixate on an individual player, and I suppose we're guilty of it slightly here with Tav and with Dessers. But we could mention Butland, awful yesterday. I thought should have saved the first 2. Positioning at the second one in particular was really poor. I think that he's not had a good 6 months. Defensively, I thought we were an absolute bomb scare, to be honest. Proper, and Suter looked like nervous kittens every time the ball came out the box. The fullbacks, as you mentioned, Andy, struggled. Midfield couldn't get to grips with it at all. Front line contributed nothing. McCausland came on, had a couple of opportunities, but no quality. Czerny was a non-event. Dessers wasn't involved. So it's not picking on one individual player. That was the collective. And here's the thing then about where we are now. Some people have said to me, and they're correct, well, would you want the manager sacked? Right? No, I don't. It doesn't mean that I think this is absolutely the manager who's going to lead us to success. I think the jury is out on him. But I do not want him sacked because we cannot keep repeating this mistake. So the way in that is this manager gets the year and we review it in the summer. If things haven't gone well and there's no sign of progress in a year, which I think is long enough to see some progress on the field, then yes, you make the change, but you make it in the summer when a manager can come in and work with the players and hopefully sign a couple that he wants. And then you make the change. Doing it mid-season doesn't work. We've far too much evidence to tell us that, and we don't just want to be straight back to where we were a couple of years ago. But here's the thing about the board and about John Bennett and about the chairman. We're in the same position that we were a year ago, that we were 2 years ago. It keeps repeating. And John Bennett has been the chairman for those 2 years. So there's a body of evidence now. At what point, Ross, do you say, I'm actually not very good at this? As much as I want to do well, and as keen as I am to do well, it's not happening, is it? I mean, really, I've not been good in this role. I've made bad decisions, and it's quite clear. And this is the thing when the club talk about rebuilds, and he did it in that interview when the manager does it. Less so the manager, by the way. I don't blame him for that. But when you hear the club talk about the fans need to be patient because we're in a rebuild, I think this is the bit that they don't get when they say that. When they say, the fans need to be patient, we're in a rebuild. We're in a rebuild because of you, because of the mistakes you've made. So when you go, look, we're in a rebuild, that doesn't make us all go, aye, fair enough. It makes us go, aye, we know, because you've arsed up the last 2 years. That's why. And surely there comes a point when you need to take yourself out a bit, put a bit of distance in and say, I've tried my best, but I'm actually not good at this. And I'm going to have to, because they're owners and investors, and that's great, I'll stick to the investing and, a bit of oversight. But I need to get people in here who know what they're doing and know how to run a club properly.
If you're rebuilding your house, David, you wouldn't just put up the external structure and not put a roof on top just because that's at the top of the building. You would rebuild it all. And I think you're spot on. This is the bit that they don't seem to get. You can change as much from the playing staff as you like, whether that be the manager, whether that be the backroom of the coaching staff, whether that be the players themselves, because God knows we have tried doing that now over the last few seasons, but we are still getting the same results. And when that kind of thing happens, you begin to look upwards. I've long held a suspicion that we are ran by people who feel burdened rather than inspired by Rangers and their history. And I get that they have put a lot of money into Rangers Football Club, and I'm thankful for that. But money without results is nothing to me, to be honest. I think most fans would probably say the same with that. I would expect to see a much better ROI than what we are currently getting. And these people are all very successful businessmen and women. They're much more successful in business than I'll ever be. But they would not let their own companies be run like this. They would hire the best people in the best positions to get the best outcomes. And that doesn't seem to be the case at Rangers right now. We're in a position where we might be appointing, was it the vice chairman or something of St Mirren as our next CEO. Is that a comparable job role, really, between St Mirren and Rangers? Okay, yeah, you might know Scottish football, but again, how much of that is really relevant within there? How much of that organisational development kind of point of view in terms of appointing the right people to do the best jobs really comparable between St Mirren and Rangers? I don't know. I'd say probably not a lot. But you would want these members of the board, and John Bennett takes the flak from it because he's the most public-facing element of our board. You'd want them to be quite introspective and ask themselves, am I doing the best I can for Rangers? Because coincidentally, David, I'm not one of the people that says that they
that's
don't
the thing.
care. They do. I
think,
truly believe they do care
they
about
do
Rangers.
So do I, but it's like, I agree, they're doing their best. What I'm saying is, well-meaning incompetence is still incompetence.
Yes, exactly. So you would like to think that they would really look in the mirror and say, for the club that I love, because I think we're pretty much all agreed that they do love Rangers, for the club that I love, am I a hindrance or a help right now? And all evidence leads towards the former in terms of the management of Rangers. But I reckon Andy would probably want to come in on this.
Andy, before you do, you work in a high-pressure, results-based industry. And in your job, if there were guys who were nice guys who were really trying their best, would you just let them continually keep having a go at it even though they were failing?
Of course no.
Exactly.
So you try to get me to say something bad about John Bennett? Is that what this is about? You ganged up? You
No,
talking about this before the pod?
I think John Bennett can be an investor, and we'll all be grateful for that. And he can keep an eye on the finances, make sure we don't get into any trouble, make sure there's no wastage at the club, all of that. One thing I think is now proven after 2 years is that he can't run a successful football side of a business.
So again, I'll come out this smelling like a bored acolyte. This is not what I'm saying. John Bennett, I think, it's not about intention. We know the intentions are 100% right, and I think that goes for the full board, right? Intentions are as clean as a whistle. Execution's a problem. And what we've got is a situation where we're getting into territory where sack the board. That's where we're getting into, let's be honest about it. And it's no realistic concept because we can't sack the board, and there is a need for some of what they provide, right, which is the John Bennett providing the leaks of the revolving credit facility, the overdraft that's easy through a season right now. That's just one thing, right? The background to why we got here cannot be simply dismissed because from 2012 to 2016, we know what happened. These guys came in around 2016. You're running at 100 miles an hour to catch up. It took about 100 million at external investments, soft loans, turn to shares, etc., to get us to 55, right? We, and I include myself in this, I think we're actually under a false impression that's us back, we've caught up. But what we can see now, looking backwards from 55 to now, is that there was a cost to be paid for that, which was that we had a lot of commitments to player purchases. And it now looks like a bit of a Pyrrhic victory because there was damage in getting there, right? So we got what we wanted, but actually we got there and then we're like, right, we've got to pay the piper now. And this is what the cost cutting is about. This is what the reversal of the wage bill has been. Because I think that John Bennett, for example, would have cut this wage bill 2-3 years ago. So we've got to this stage now where John Bennett is a bit of a lightning rod because, quite rightly, folk point out, well, John's been there since for the period, right? So he's the constant. But I would then say, right, well, he's no the chairman. He's no been the chairman for a lot of it. So the Douglas Park era, Dave King certainly made decisions that we're still paying for just now. And he's came in, and what you can hold him account to is that he's came in and he's changed the executive board. So this is where I get, tetchy, because I say, right, what do you mean by the board? Because one of the first things he did was he get rid of he had to get rid of Ross Wilson because he was leaving. Stuart Robinson managing director position was split. He made it a chief exec role plus a director of the football director, whatever Craig Robertson's title is. You've got the Coppin assignment. You've got you had Zeb Jacobs, who's now left. So he made changes that were positive. Now you can then critique were they the right people. You can definitely critique that, but you can also say, right, do we have the resources to get what we want, which is top drawer, because we demand top drawer all the time. I think he's been badly let down by James Bisgrove, because if James Bisgrove was still in situ just now, we wouldn't be talking about John Bennett, we'd be talking about James Bisgrove, and rightly so. So I think he's been let down there, right? And I know James Bisgrove got a great offer for Saudi and blah, blah, blah. He's been let down because James Bisgrove got a great opportunity at Rangers, and it was John Bennett, I think, who afforded him it. And what's happened is that John Bennett has had to pick up the mantle at the worst possible time from when Bisgrove left. He's been left with the Ibrox redevelopment debacle. He's got the need for a rebuild. He's got the cutting of the wage bill against his name now, basically. And it might be that John Bennett takes the flak for all this. But what I like to think is that we get forward a year, 2 years, and we're in better shape for a bit of the pain that we're going through right now. Might seem like a hill of beans, but the stadium were better. The wage bill being less and more value for me it's a necessity. It had to be done. It had to be done for a number of reasons, not just the kind of the obvious. I think the sustainability thing is something that's hanging over us like a cloud, and I think we had to get a bit of give there. And I've got sympathy for Bennett in the here and now, right? But there's no hiding place. And what is going wrong badly at Rangers is this leadership piece, because he came out and he done a wee bit not that long ago, remember? Mm-hmm. And it's fine. And I made the point that, a lot of what he said before, it was a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when they came out and told us about the four pillars and all that kind of stuff. It was all there for us to see as the fundamental vision, right? And it still is the four pillars. They're just getting into the nitty gritty of it now. So I think we need to deal with reality, and I'm saying we as a support. The board are not going to relinquish anything unless something remarkable happens, right? We do need them. There's a bit of foisting pact here. We do need them in some regards. And what I would like them to do is understand that if they're sitting there thinking, to your point, Davey, the fans need to be patient, then if this season's a write-off, they can't come out and say that, because we would crack up, right? And season ticket sales would drop and everything else. But they need to understand that we will be willing to stick with the team if we see progress. We will be willing to stick with the manager and everything else that's going on if we see progress. And I think we're now at a stage of we need to get right back to basics. And again, I'm saying we, the support, I think this is game to game. Do you know that? And that's the first time I've ever been in a situation where as a Rangers fan, I'm like, I am not going to look beyond the next game, because there is no point looking beyond that, because everything is fluid. And the noise just now is so unbearably hot that I think there would be a lot of merit in actually just taking that that kind of view, that kind of concept to heart. Because if we are expecting things to get better before it gets worse, I think we might be disappointed. And what we cannot get to is the stage that we got to last season at the Aberdeen at home game, when it just got so toxic that there was no way back for Beale, and the players looked absolutely shell-shocked. So there's a bit of protectionism, what I'm saying here, and that we need to make sure that we survive this period. And by survive, I mean we don't burn the place down, and we allow a couple of things that are being implemented to actually breathe. And we see if they work. Because what I said yesterday post-match, David, was that if the Rangers hierarchy, right, we talk about the board, but this is about the football department, this is about the players, this is about everybody at Ibrox. If there's no a wholehearted, this is where we need to be in a year's time kind of thought process being spoken about right now, even if it's just reaffirming what has been spoken about before in terms of a vision, if we're not sticking to that or making sure that we've got something in place for that, then that is a dereliction. So we've got. I'm trusting the process. I quite understand why other fans aren't, because their patience will be burnt to the ground. My patience is pretty much as low as it's ever been in my entire time as a Rangers supporter. But that's where I'm at with the entire kind of board dynamic. It's complicated. I'm not giving them a pass, but I do think that we need to get through this period, because we could make it worse ourselves if we don't just, get a wee bit cooler heads. Easier said than done.
I think the concern is, though, obviously, I think we all know we need to get value for money in the wage bill. That's an absolute certainty. We've not had value for money, either in transfer fees or in the wage bill, for a number of years now. But if we are saying that this season's a write-off, there's no guarantee that next season won't be a write-off by this time next year as well. We're in a position where we can't financially compete with Celtic because of their newfound Champions League riches, and they're away signing players for £9 million, £11 million, selling players for 20, 25. Is John Bennett presiding over a period of managed decline at Rangers? Because it certainly feels like it.
No, because managed decline indicates that you're aware of it and you are then managing that through. This is my problem. It's not that all the things that Andy said there have some truth to them. My issue is, I think you need to be honest with yourself and say, am I the best guy to implement these changes, given that the reason a lot of them need to be implemented are decisions I have taken? And I think that it's difficult as a supporter when the club say, trust us, we know what we're doing, when we go, well, actually, the last 3 years indicate that you don't. And that, I think, is where the disconnect comes from.
This is where the CEO become. The CEO was a big decision to be made anyway, right? But now it takes on a whole different status, because I don't know John Bennett. I don't know what he's thinking. I wouldn't be surprised if he's sitting there saying, I'm going to see this through to a point and then step aside. And he might go down in history as, the most abused chairman ever, and folk will justify it. But I think John Bennett sees it as bigger than himself. I don't think he's got an ego in that regard, right? So if he's the man that has to do what needs to be done at this point in time, then so be it. But the chief exec that comes in next needs to be of a certain stuff. They need to have a bit of their own vision to supplement whatever the vision that they're being handed by the club, because it's in motion, whatever that is just now, right? They need to know Scottish football, as Ross says, because I think that is, just as I'm saying about Clement, knowing innately, or not knowing innately, but we all know what people understand this world to be like. I think the next CEO needs to. That's a big thing in Celtic's overall success for the last 20 years, is the fact that in the boardroom they've had folk that know Scotland and know Scottish football, and they know how to work it. So we need somebody that's of that ilk, get a bit of Street Fighter in them, and is willing to stick around, because we need continuity. And this is, again, something to do with Clement. I think continuity is something we need to try for a wee while, because it's too easy to say, end the rinse and repeat. I get that. But I do think that we need continuity, because continuity breeds connections, it breeds sustainability, and that goes on the football park as well. So the next CEO appointment is even bigger than it was 2 weeks ago. And they have to get it right. They have to get this one right.
Well, that's... Yeah, I was listening quite intently there, Andy. And you just...
And I stopped because I left a breath. I ran out of things to say.
You ran out of breath.
I'll keep going. I'll keep going.
No, I was quite impressed with that. Ross, effectively now, given where we are, the mood, all of these things, we're basically game to game for a while at minimum. It's just win the next game and then do it again next week until you have built up a bit of momentum, a bit of trust.
Yeah, completely agree with it too. Yeah, I think Andy hit the nail on the head there when he said it's the first time we've really been looking game to game at a situation like this, because there's really no point in looking a month down the line, 2 months down the line, trying to figure out what that might be, or what the league situation might be, because we don't know, right? This Rangers team is so temperamental. We have no idea the direction of travel, and we don't really see the light at the end of the tunnel with regards to performances. So there's no real point looking farther ahead until we are maybe a few months down the line. We've had a consistent run of wins under our belts, a consistent run of good performances under our belts, and then we can maybe start looking further ahead. And I know it's a cliche for the footballers to say it all the time. The best thing they can do is look at the next game as well, because when you start looking at the league table and there's already a mountain to climb there, then that's going to do nobody any good. There's a few teams around us in the league who look like they've made really strong starts as well, Aberdeen being the big one. But when we go and play Dundee United in a couple of weeks' time, that's the only thing we can be thinking about between now and the remainder of this international break before the game comes around. Because that's a tough enough fixture at the absolute best of times. Never mind being in a position where they will really fancy a crack at us. So if we can go there, get through that and give maybe a different type of performance, a gutsy one where you will need to dig in, you will need to show resolve and fight and get through that, then we can maybe start looking game to game to try and build something more. But there's no point looking at fixtures a month or two down the line. We just take each one as it comes, because we'll drive ourselves mental if we don't do that, quite frankly, and that's just from a fan's point of view.
Do you want me to say something positive, Dave, before we run out of time?
Of course, anytime.
This can be turned around, right? And I'm not sitting here saying we're going to win the league, but we can find positives out this season. And at some point, you can land a bloody nose on Celtic, and that turns the tide to a degree. This is going to be slow, but it can be done, and it can be done with smart decisions and a bit of heart. Support have got a part to play, because we need to get off our knees. Easier said than done as well. We need to get off our knees, fight for everything, and do what we always do. We've done it before. We've walked the walk more than any support in world football, right? We're back in a position where we're like, we need to see something happen. So it can be turned around, and there still can be good moments in this season, no question about it. But I go back to my point, we need to see progress, because progress will generate that belief to actually have belief. You know, it's yesterday after that game, a lot of fans and a lot of listeners will be sitting there saying, well, there is no light at the end of this tunnel. There will be light at the end of the tunnel. We just need to start generating it. And that's what, to the point about game by game, we can do that. And when we do get a kick in the balls, we need to move on and fast, because we are where we are just now. We've got the squad we've got, and I think we need to get that continuity kind of bubbling over.
Well, I'll leave you with something. My cousin is Northern Irish, and like a lot of Northern Irish people, has a Scottish and an English team, Rangers and Manchester United. And he said to me at the weekend on Sunday night, David, that Rangers-Man United game might be the first one where two teams managed to both lose painfully. So there's some gallows humour kicking about, I think it's fair to say. But yeah, it's Dundee United, Tannadice, next game, 3 points, move on, start to build, because that's really all you can do when you walk through hell, keep going, as Winston Churchill once put it, and he's absolutely spot on. Right then, folks, that will do us for this week here on Heart and Hand. No show next week, of course, because of international break, but my thanks to our producers, Mike Lee and Paul Myers, and my thanks to, first of all, Andy McGowan.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on again.
Oh, the one day, son, we'll have you on here for a victory. I promise, right? First time it happens, right?
You do owe me that. I do know that. You owe me anything, but you owe me that.
If we win the New Year game, mate, I promise you, you're on. You're on. In fact, we'll do it just immediately after live, and you can broadcast to a nation. And to Ross Hutton.
Cathartic as always, Davey. Thanks very much, mate.
Thanks for listening, folks. We'll speak to you again soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.